Welcome back, everyone. I hope you managed to have a break or a cup of tea and you're ready for our final afternoon session. We've got a number of wonderful presentations for you. I'm really excited. And we're going to just kick off straight away with the wonderful Liz Stokes. So Liz Stokes is a senior research data skills specialist at the Australian Research Data Commons. She's passionate about data skills training and community development for reproducible research and open science. Liz is going to introduce us to the Carpentries and how they can assist GLAMR workers to actively look for ways of doing things differently, learn skills that loosen our dependency on proprietary software, and sharpen our ability to curate, preserve, and share digital collections. Liz, it's wonderful to have you here. Here you go.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Well, hello. I'm really looking forward to sharing my enthusiasm about library carpentry and the Carpentries in general with you today, and why it's an ideal way to learn data science skills and apply them to GLAMR professional goals. I'm super pumped to talk about how to create the conditions for putting into practice new skills that we don't have yet. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting. I'm based in the inner west of Sydney, which are the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge that Indigenous sovereignty has not been ceded in Australia. I extend a warm welcome to any First Nations people here today. So, how do we learn new skills? How do we build the confidence to test them out? And how do we build these into our daily practices? Once more with feeling. Naturally, when I saw the prompt for this GoGlam mini-conf by Hugh and Bonnie, my mind went to straight to one of my favourite pastimes, professional development. And if you're thinking that it's going to be a whole bunch of fiddle toys, that's absolutely correct. I am happy to acknowledge that I'm a big nerd and I love professional development. I love peer-to-peer learning. I love the serendipitous connections that you get when you go along to those workshops. I love the hot tips from the expert that just seem to come in incidentally in addition to the content that you're learning. And I love the unexpected tips from the back of the room from other people. And I have to say that I miss fidget toys and highlighters and butcher's paper. Hashtag 2020, I guess. For me, though, learning and skill development is a felt experience. I should put a disclaimer in here, actually. There are going to be some puns. Some of them I'm not really going to explain. Just wanted to prepare you for that. It's how I learn. I reckon that how we learn and how we build these new skills is really important, and that we should pay attention to how we do that. The emotional dimensions of learning to program shouldn't be underestimated. And I'd like to quote from Melanie Walsh, who is a lecturer at Cornell University, who acknowledges that instilling in students that they are smart enough to code is really big. And I found this is a really resonant statement for me. So, yes, that's all very well and nice, but it can be hard to see what's relevant when you're unfamiliar with the landscape. Data, AI, machine learning, containerization, cloud computing, Python. Sometimes it's hard to work out what are the relevant skills and how to learn them when you're just starting out. Oh, I also forgot another disclaimer that I probably should have made at the start. So while I'm talking about the Carpentries and this kind of professional development, my talk is really optimized for people from the GLAM sector, galleries, libraries, archives, museums, and records too, as well, is optimized for people from these professions who are not yet experts. So perhaps for people who are seasoned attendees of Linux Conference Australia, a lot of what I'm talking about is going to be very, very, very familiar to you. And I acknowledge that what I might be talking about could be boring. I just thought I'd acknowledge that right now. Okay. So when I'm talking about the relevant skills, actually I'm talking about the skills required to make the kinds of projects happen that we've heard about already today. So this involves thinking computationally, literally learning how to think like a computer. It also includes things like expertise on collaboration platforms, working in the open and learning what it is that supports reproducible research. And it also includes my particular areas, which are how to enable the underpinnings of research findings, which is usually data or like a whole bunch of stuff that we call data, like Mike Lynch's data blobs, to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So these skills, they relate to people who are data users. They relate to how we make our systems and services interoperable. They come up at different points in the whole process. For example, I think if you can approach a problem programmatically, then you're in a better position to scale your solution. If you can write a script to clean data, then you can reduce the tedium in your everyday workflow. So let's talk about the Carpentries. My involvement in the Carpentries has grown over a couple of years, where I am now a certified instructor and trainer of instructors. And I co-chair the Library Carpentry Advisory Group, where we do advocacy for the Carpentries. So the Carpentries broadly is a volunteer global organisation which concentrates on teaching foundational coding and data science skills to research communities. So for me, that means the people at, that means researchers, but it also means the people who support researchers, like librarians and museum curators and tech developers and the e-research and data skills infrastructure trainers who support researchers. The kinds of things that we teach in the Carpentries are, for example, introduction to fundamental data science skills like cleaning data. We also teach familiarity with the command line interface. We teach introduction to programming languages, including Python and R. We teach writing scripts, automation, version control, and collaboration. So for me, good professional development is like being gently lowered into a pot of salted boiling water and getting cooked to al dente perfection. But in GLAMR professions, these relevant tech skills are not what we've always been rewarded for seeking out. And all too often, the PD opportunities tend to be workshops that seem to be not much more than attending a webinar or a talk about how things work. And I think that knowing about these skills is not as good as being able to put them into practice. So one of the things that really drew me to the Carpentries is how they paid attention to social infrastructure. And for me, this starts from the lesson plan and radiates outwards. So within the Carpentries, we have a lot of different onboarding processes for different roles. That's why there are different roles on the screen here. People who maintain lesson materials, people who instruct workshops, and people who train those instructors. There is a curriculum development handbook. There are structures for hosting community discussions, for teaching demonstrations, and managing the certification process. These all feed into the soft skills that are needed for teaching and sharing tech skills. There's also a code of conduct, which I think is really important as well, and we use that code of conduct to be part of creating a welcoming and positive environment for learning. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our pedagogical philosophies in the Carpentries, and then I'm going to do a short demonstration of using the GitHub interface to submit a pull request. Okay, so that's going to be my live demo, and well, it may or may not work. I just thought I'd prepare you for that happening. So in the Carpentries, we say the typos are the pedagogy. And we say this a lot because if pedagogy is about the method and practice of teaching, then the typos are the pedagogy because we learn from our mistakes. Typos are an excellent case in point because when you're typing in front of an audience, writing out a line of code, chances are there'll always be a typo. Live coding is an integral part of Carpentries workshops where we pay a special attention to explaining how and what we're typing and when things go wrong, using mistakes and typos as an opportunity to ask the group, what's wrong with this picture? Sometimes when you're teaching, it's hard to remember this, and it's a really good save that you can go, what's wrong with, just externalize the internal freak out that you're experiencing. Incidentally, this is one of the benefits of online teaching, also because it's easier to share screens with the whole class. You have to be careful that learners trust that you're holding a respectful space using phrases like, it's really easy, just fork the repo and submit a pull request. Hot tip, chunk your work into branches before submitting. Even your grandma could do this. At breakneck speed, sounds like you're kind of being gentle and reassuring, but it can be very off-putting if the learners are feeling unsure about which direction a pull request goes and whether branches are up or downstream and they float in the middle, all that kind of jazz. So when our instructors go through the certification process, they are assessed on exactly this kind of language because our main purpose is to create a positive and welcoming environment that learners feel empowered to return to and try something new themselves. And if this sounds like embedding a growth mindset by stealth, I believe this is true. Recycling this joke for a second time, well, if I can make a joke about something, then I can learn about it. Learning, and I have found that learning to teach and share skills helps you learn other things. I'm going to use an analogy here. So the typos are the pedagogy. In teaching my daughter to ride a bike a couple of years ago, as a young child, I actually incidentally learned how to run. It happened because her other mum and I didn't want her to become dependent on training wheels, but to learn to balance. You can get a handle that attaches to the seat post, right? And which provides stability while they get used to the sensation of a larger bike. I didn't teach her by riding my own bike around her. She had to get comfortable with pedaling on her own. And you'll appreciate that a kid on a bike goes much faster than an easy walking or pram pushing pace that I used to be used to. So running was an unexpected outcome, but I've since experienced joy at running ragged around a park in full Lycra activewear, and I understand the mental and physical health benefits. So in this way, certifying as a Carpentries instructor provided me with the impetus to learn and use Git and the GitHub platform. And now I use these in my day-to-day work, as well as with other international collaborations, such as the Library Carpentry Fair Data and Software lesson. And the advisory group uses GitHub actually as a repository for our meeting minutes and collaborations that we're working on. We also, in my work with the ARDC, the Australian Research Data Commons, we use GitHub as a way to organise our training materials. And I would like to actually show you that first. And then I'm going to do a short demo on how you can submit a pull request if you've never done anything like this before. And And hopefully that goes okay. All right. So I'm just going to prepare you by flicking over to, oh, I said flick. Sorry, you might expect me to send you an email. Apologize for that. Don't expect emails from me. Okay, so just changing the screen over here. This is the web page that we have, the RDC has for our Fair Data 101 Express course. So this is about teaching the fair data principles. And you can have a click around in this. In fact, if I can be really fancy, I can cut and paste that into the GoGlam mini conference BOF chat now. If you want to have a poke around, go for it. Which is all very well and good. And this is how you get to see our course resources. And this is what our learners received when they were going through with the course. I've just clicked over to the findable module. And here you've got the learning outcomes, a couple of videos, scrolling down now, activities, discussion starters, and a quiz, right? So a bunch of learning materials. Nice, friendly, everything's all together. But on the underneath, we put all of this into a GitHub repository because we needed to do two things. We needed to collaborate on it because there's more than one of us working on it. We also wanted to put it somewhere where other people would be able to contribute and give us feedback on how it goes. So we chose to put it on a GitHub repository. If you haven't seen a GitHub repository before, this is what it looks like when you see the first page on the front page of the repository. And this one's the Fair Data Training 101, Fair Data 101 Training repository. Some people call them repos, which is endearing, but it makes me think of the Grim Reaper, and that's uncomfortable. So coming back to the point of why I'm talking to you, this is what a repository looks like. Over here on the right-hand side, this is actually the link out to the front-facing rendered page of course materials. As you can see, when I scroll down, you can get to the README file. And this is a really important convention for reproducible research and open collaboration. You have a README so people read it, and it has all the important information, explainer information about it. Okay, let me, just going to run back to my presentation because I wanted to explain this. To me, last year was a new skill for me, forking the repository of a friendly stranger to experiment or suggest changes and submitting a pull request. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Git and GitHub, forking a repo sounds like a rude thing that you would do to somebody else's salad, okay? But actually, that's not true. Git is a way of managing version control for software code. And GitHub is a browser-based interface for using Git for your collaborations. So I'm just going to return, in fact, not return, I'm going to come over to a resource that demonstrates how I might submit a pull request. Okay, so the reason that you would have a repository is because you might have a list of useful information that you want to share with other people. This repository here is created by Amanda Miotto. She's pretty awesome senior research, e-research analyst from Griffith University. And she's created a repository here, or a repo, for useful bookmarks that she uses when she hosts Hacky Hour. So here is a nice big list of resources that she has. Now, recently, I was trolling around on the internet and I found this awesome new course. I'm going to show you what it looks like up here. Introduction to Cultural Analytics and Python. I'm so excited. This looks like the shit, right? Designed by Melanie Walsh from Cornell University. So I thought, oh, this is great. I should tell Amanda about it because I think this would be really useful as a Python resource could add to her list. So what I'm going to do right now is demonstrate a pull request in a relatively straightforward way, and then hope that you bear with me while I do that. So I'm going to come over back to the Hacky Hour GitHub repository. So if on this page, you can see this is the page and it's in Markdown format. Because I'm on a browser-based thing, GitHub makes it really easy to suggest small changes. If I hover over here on the little pencil icon, it says I'm going to edit the file in your fork of this project. I'm going to click this and give it a little bit of time. And now GitHub warns me what's happening. It says, hey, you're making changes in a project that you don't have write access to. So submitting a change is going to write it to a new branch in your fork under Ragamuff, and that's my name. It's the same as my Twitter handle for obvious reasons. So you can send a pull request, right? So the reason why there's this language around repositories and branches and forking is if you can imagine a repository as a stream, okay, as a river. And this river is great. The original person creates the river. But if you would like to make changes, then it creates a fork copy of that river. And that's where you get to make changes without interrupting the original repository as it is, okay? So it's not like having someone come in and make changes to your Word document or your Google Doc and you are momentarily disoriented as they appear. Of course, you can check version history, and that's true. But I'm coming back to my original point. So what GitHub is going to do is create that fork for me. I'm going to scroll down now and actually make my change, hopefully from some little bits of pieces of text that I have prepared earlier. So scrolling, what I'm doing down here is scrolling through the Markdown file, and I'm looking for I knew I would forget. I'm looking for the section about Python. There it is. Right. Okay. So here I can just add in a little, a new comma, a new line. I'm going to add in a pipe. Oh, I'm not going to put a double thing in there. And I'm going to go introduction to cultural analytics in using Python. Okay. And then I'm going to put another pipe in there. That's that long, tall, sticky thing. And I'm going to paste in no, that's the wrong one. So let's see, where's the URL? Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, Control C, and replace that in there. Put a space, finish up the pipe, okay? And so I don't know if Markdown is a familiar kind of language for you. It's a way of being able to mark up text in an open way and relatively straightforward. I can even click on preview changes to see if I've done anything untoward, and it looks pretty okay. You can see the new line there I've added with a green line. So what I'm going to do then, I can keep scrolling down, right down to the bottom of the page. This is a long page, down to this really important section here, proposed changes. Okay, so the reason why we have this section is because it provides shorthand for what I've done and gives me an opportunity to explain why I've done it. And here I'm going to use a little bit of text that I have prepared earlier so you don't have to hear me think about what to say on the spot. Adding Python for cultural analytics. and then maybe a little bit more explainer text, okay? Because documenting your code and documenting your changes is a cornerstone of reproducible research, and it's really useful for GLAMR professionals too, right? So no one has the, why did somebody do it this way? And for what reason and what were the circumstances? Okay, so there's a bit more explainer text there. I'm just going to click on proposed changes. Yeah, great. And there we go. So I have here it says, yes, it's able to be merged. Okay. Here is the new bit. It shows me that. And then I think I can create the pull. Oh, no. Yes, then I can create the pull request. Okay. So it takes in my information. Here's what I've already added. And I can just click this button here. And that's going to send a request message to Amanda saying, Liz has got some things to say about this. Let me know. So, time to come back to the rest of my talk. Going reasonably well, I think, for time. Okay, so you might be asking, what can you do now with this kind of information? And I've got a few suggestions. So the first thing is that you could look for workshops in your area. And that's a link here to the Australian region list of workshops. And if there isn't any of the kind that you were interested in, please make a request. Let us know where your interest lies. There's also the Vala Tech Camp, which will have a lot of workshops along this kind of direction. In the March, April time zone general area, I believe that registrations for this will open soon, or at least are very imminent. And I would also encourage you to explore the library carpentry lessons on our website, because all of our lesson materials are open source and they're licensed CC BY so that you can use them. So that's pretty much it from me about what I've got to say about what these relevant skills are. I think we can learn from how people work together and collaborate on open platforms, and we can use those for improving our own practices. So I'm excited to share these skills with researchers, but also excited to see that we can use these methods for innovating our own professional concerns. So I look forward to talking more with you about this in the chat. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Liz. That was really great. I'm just going to ask one question of you before we disappear into the chat. I think, so from experience, it can often be hard to articulate, say, in our performance development plans, why we feel that these kind of skills are necessary. Or sometimes, we might be able to articulate that, but it may not be accepted. Do you have any sort of hints or tricks for us GLAMR people out there wanting to, develop these skills, but sort of having a hard time working them into the workplace?
Yeah.
Any advice there?
I definitely do. I will see. I've got some resources to dig out, because this was one of the projects we had from last year in the advisory group, that people wanted help making the arguments to their library directors why it's important for librarians to join the Carpentries as a membership organisation, and how to make those claims that if we develop these skills, then it means we can put our attention towards other more interesting work and other concerns. So we do have a couple of one-pager type descriptions that focus focus on making the arguments to senior administration, and also at a more, perhaps at a more employee perspective on how to make those arguments or how to start that kind of conversation with your supervisor.
Awesome. I think people will find that really valuable. And I think you would probably agree too that, you know, there's this idea of an open mindset or an open source mindset that really there's shared elements across both the library profession and the open source community, right? Like around how we understand information to access or access to information to be this sort of fundamental right, and that it should be free and open, and that information wants to be free. And yet we're sort of, at least in the library world, locking ourselves behind proprietary software. And, you know, I guess there's sort of this loss of the community to an extent in a lot of what we're doing because of that. So I think, you know, do you kind of agree that moving into this space and being able to articulate it may help us to actually get back to those fundamental values, do you think?
Yes, I do agree. I think that there is a time and a place for proprietary software, and that when we, I spent a long time before this talk wondering if I could work in Audre Lorde's assertion or challenge that the master's tools can never dismantle the master's house, but I couldn't work out how to make it right, make it coherent, really. But that sits behind what I think where Audre Lorde was coming from in the main, in terms of the main motivation of her argument, that it's about our motivations behind what we're doing. So of course they can, but it depends. If we're using the master's rules for using those tools, then of course we can't. So if we're only using black box products for our own good, which is often the message that we tend to get from vendors, then that's not helpful. What is helpful and what skills are relevant mean digging into underneath and how these tools are created in the first place, because then we'll see other needs and we'll have other opportunities to actually remedy that situation.
Oh, so good to talk to you. Look, I'm going to stop hogging you, and I'm going to let you jump into the chat, because I know that there's going to be lots of talk around this. There's heaps of interest in joining the Carpentries. I know people have expressed wanting to, you know, how do they become a trainer? How do they get involved? So I'm going to let you go and jump in there and field those questions. How does that sound?
It sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Thank you, Liz. Well, we'll only be departing for a little bit, because you're back at 4:40 with Ingrid Mason and also Dr. Jason Enser, who are going to be talking to us or inviting us to join the AU and NZ regional chapter of AI for LAM. Now that kicks off at 4:40. So Liz, you go jump in the chat. Everyone join her there, and we'll see you back here for 4:40. Thank you.
Thank you.